Epoch 5, Discipleship in 5 minutes. An epoch is simply a moment, a notable event, or a significant person that changes everything. The history of Christianity is filled with these God-sized moments, events, and people that shaped our faith. We're committed to teaching you about them. It's how we understand the journey God has taken us on. Think of the apostolic fathers' names like Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, and Polycarp. These weren't just scholars. They were the eyewitnesses of the eyewitnesses. They were the direct disciples of the apostles themselves. Their writings are an irreplaceable snapshot of the early faith, showing us exactly how the church was living, worshiping, and structuring itself immediately after the New Testament. Studying them isn't just history. It's confirming the continuity of the Christian faith, the unbroken chain that links the time of Christ straight to us today.
Well, Epoch 5 is our 5-minute discipleship strategy. It teaches you about key historical people, key historical times. That's why we call it epic. These are epic people, epic times, and we try to do it in 5 minutes. The reason why we introduce this idea is that there's a number of things throughout church history that we don't normally preach on. And so we wanted to bring to you some things that we don't normally preach on, but are key to the development of the Christian faith. And so, as you know, we've done Nicene Creed in 5 minutes, 3 increments, and we did the canonization of the 66 books of the Bible. And Pastor Mike started the early church fathers last week, and we'll do a couple more of these. And so that's what Epoch 5 is about, a 5-minute discipleship strategy. Early church fathers, as you know, Jesus and the 12 apostles, Jesus discipled the 12 apostles to be imitators of him. That's what a disciple is, an imitator of Jesus. So then the apostles, when Jesus was ascended to heaven, they discipled people to be imitators of Jesus. So Peter and Paul discipled a guy named Clement, and he was in Rome. Could you imagine how cool that would be to be discipled by Peter and Paul rather than being discipled by Bob, Mike, and Randy? How cool for him. So all we're trying to do is bring people to imitate Jesus, not necessarily ourselves. And so who is this guy, Clement? So he would have met Peter and Paul in his 30s. It was in the time of 50 AD. So in the 50s, they were in their final decade of ministry, Peter and Paul. And they were investing in a guy named Clement, a young 30-something guy. And then later, he became a key early church father. And so what was his claim to fame? It really is one letter. He did a lot of things. But you know, people can boil your life down to one thing, can't they? But this guy did one amazing thing for sure. And it dealt with the church in Corinth. So the Corinthian church. This was about 617 miles away as a crow flies from Rome to Corinth. So Clement was in Rome. These guys were in Corinth. Clement didn't have any authority over the Corinthian church, but he wrote a letter that changed the world of the early church, and it changed how we do church governance even to today. So what was going on? So what would happen is that the apostles then, when they were in charge of the early churches, they would be in charge of the early churches. And then their disciples, like a Clement, they would put Clement in charge of their next church when Peter and Paul were gone. And so it kind of became these people who learned to imitate Jesus, and they grew in their stature and their credibility. They became the leaders. Well, in the Corinthian church, there was a bunch of young rascalians. What do you call them? Rascals. But these young people overthrew the old guard. And it was moving out the people who were discipled by the early church fathers and the apostles. And they moved them out and they overthrew. It was an internal coup inside of a church. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Church hurt, church problems. They even had it in the early church. And I bet you some of them went home and said, I'm never going to a church again. I'm just going to do it online because I'm so mad. So here they had this faction of young members that unjustly removed the legitimate appointed leaders of the church in this early coup. And so Clement wrote, 1 Clement was the name of the letter, and he wrote a very strong letter to the Corinthians. The fact that Clement from Rome felt compelled to intervene in a church far across the Mediterranean was interesting. It had never been done before. There was no denominations, but he felt as a leader in one of the churches, discipled by Peter and Paul, he knew what the right thing was, and he wrote a letter to them. The amazing thing is that this letter pleaded for order, humility, and obedience. And Clement masterfully argued what God wanted for his early church. And believe it or not, the young people listened to it and restored the rightful, appropriate leaders, and they humbled themselves under this. Clement wanted order restored in the church, and his letter was not only accepted by the church in Corinth, but it was accepted by many of the churches. In fact, they would read his letter during the church services, and the order was restored in Corinth. The letter was revered. He is known for church governance, and that we need to have order, not chaos, appropriate leadership in place. And that's who we wanted to introduce you today. It's Clement of Rome.